This class will be concerned with systems and introducing you to some of the basic ideas associated with systems thinking. For a start, a couple of views about systems. A system may be seen as an assemblage or combination of things or parts forming a complex or unitary whole. So it's an assembly. It's an assembly of things, of components, of parts that forms a single whole object. So a system is a whole. It's a whole thing. It's a whole object. Now a system could be a business. The business is the system, but it's made up from individual parts within the business, different departments, accountancy, marketing, production, and so on. So we can view the business as a system, but it's made up from subsystems, from individual parts within. The second part of what I've got here on the screen says this is achieved through the system not only having parts, elements or components, but through the interrelationship of these characteristics with each other. So a system is not just composed of parts, it's how the parts are connected together that makes the whole system. I know it would be unusual to think like this, but imagine a company made up from different departments, different subsystems if you like, but if they didn't talk to each other, if they didn't cooperate, then the company would not be successful. If the accounts department did not talk to the other departments, or did not collect data from the other departments, or report orders to the other departments, then of course the company would cease to exist. So the company is the system, and it's made up from subsystems, different departments, let's say, and the various departments are linked. They relate to each other, and that's what makes the whole system. It's the subsystems working together to make the system. Now let's move to look at some ideas about systems. For a start, system theory was developed by Bertalanffy, who proposed a general systems theory that would include organisms. So it's a very wide concept. This could include organic organisms. It could include social organizations. It could include commercial organizations. So systems may be identified as when there's a whole composed of subsystems which are linked. And they are linked to meet the objectives of the overall system. The notion of system theory or systems theory is based on interrelationships that exist within systems. The theory assumes that a system can exist in all organisms, for example in human and non-human form. The fact that we're focusing in here on business studies and business and management areas, we talk about the company as the system, the non-human form. But we have systems within our own bodies. In fact, if we take our body in total, that is a system, and it's made up from various subsystems, the heart, the liver, the lungs, and so on. And they are connected. They each contribute towards the health of the body. So we've got an idea of a system and what a system is. It's made up from subsystems that are connected. And we're starting to see that this is a very wide concept, applying to organisms, applying to organizations. The theory is based on systems, how they strive in their environment, and the impact external influences have on the development of these systems. So we take the system, let's say we take the company as a system. The company is the entity, that is the system. It's made up from subsystems, manufacturing, marketing, human resources, accountancy, finance, whatever. It's made up from various departments depending on the nature of the business. However, there are external forces working on the business as well. And the business is trying to survive in this external environment. The external environment is the socio-political environment in which we operate. It's socio-political and economic, in fact. There are economic forces in play that are outside of control for the company. For example, the rate of interest in the bank is not determined by the company. It's determined by monetary policy of the country and of the central bank. So we've now got a view of the system as trying to survive in its environment, which is very similar to what, let's say, animals do and all sorts of creatures do. What we try to do, we try to survive in our environment. So let's look at organizations specifically as systems. Systems theory emphasizes the whole being the whole system. It implies that systems are whole and everything contained in the system interacts with each other in order to maintain equilibrium in the system. So all the various subsystems within the system all work together, all cooperate, and all support each other to try and maintain an equilibrium, but try to maintain the system. Organizations are seen as systems as the whole. They are complex systems containing subsystems, structures, technology, employees, resources, and materials. So companies are quite complex as systems. They have subsystems, as I said, various departments may be seen as a subsystem. There's a structure to the company, a way in which it operates, a technology it uses. It's got its employees who have got needs and requirements and training and health and safety and all sorts of issues. It's got resources, raw materials, stores, semi-processed goods. It's got materials. It's also got marketing and linkages with the outside. So it's a very complex organization. Now we've also got this concept of open and closed systems. A system is described as open or closed, so we can view systems in this dichotomous way, a way of separating it out from each other. It's an open system or it's a closed system. The way in which systems interact with their environment depends on the type of system it is. If it's open, it'll have a certain relationship with the environment. If it's closed, it may not have a close relationship with the environment. So, for example, open systems interact with the environment. Open systems are involved with the wider environment. Closed systems are self-contained and rely on mechanisms and processes that are contained within the system. So closed systems don't interact with the environment. Closed systems are within the organization. These are systems that relate to each other within the organization. An open system is one which has linkages to the wider environment, to the outside. So there is a difference between open and closed systems. Let's look at closed systems in a little more detail. Closed systems are referred to as closed because they do not interact with the environment. Straightforward. They do not interact with the environment. They're closed. There are all sorts of examples we could use here, but this particular example is a clock, which is designed and programmed for a purpose. The clock serves a purpose. It tells the time. The components, electronical and mechanical parts, work in a relationship in order to provide the output. So the various components of the clock are there to do a job. The job is provide the output. The output is to tell the time, to show the time. And the clock's behavior is predetermined. But the clock is a self-contained system. Everything is within the clock. So the clock does not have to interact with its environment. Now I appreciate in today's world where we have the internet and we have networks, sometimes we get our time on the internet. So we're looking to the outside. In that case it's more like an open system. We are linking up to the outside world to get the time. But for more traditional clocks, old-fashioned clocks, they were closed systems. In organizational context, organizations can become closed systems by accident. Over a period of time, organizations can start to cut their linkages with the outside and become more self-sufficient. Instead of buying in certain components, they start to make the components in-house. They start to make the components within the company. And gradually links to the outside start to become less and less. Now this may be detrimental to the organization. Sometimes it's good to have linkages to the outside. It brings in a fresh perspective on the business. It develops contacts with the outside world. It fosters relationships with other companies and other organizations. And it's healthy to have linkages to the outside. But over a period of time, there is a tendency for companies to become very introvert. Now, again, we have to balance that with fairly modern approaches, because we have seen a great deal of outsourcing from companies, and we've seen the advent of globalization. So there are arguments against what I'm saying here, that which suggest that companies are becoming more outward-looking. And it depends, I suppose, critically on the nature of the business. It depends on the attitude of the owners. It depends on the perspectives that's taken within the management team as to what is the best way forward. Producing items in-house may have more security in supplies, whereas producing it in an outsourced fashion or buying in the components may be cheaper. So there's swings and roundabouts. There's a balance to be struck, and there are arguments in both directions in this case. Now, open systems. Well, open systems interact with their environment and produce change in line with external demands. So open systems tend to be more responsive to what's required of them by the wider environment. So open systems are much more in tune with what's happening in the wider environment and respond to what's happening. The company is watching trends and watching developments in the environment and keeping up with the environment, or perhaps even leading the environment, but certainly keeping up with the environment and dealing with changes as they happen. So an open system may be viewed as inputs which are transformed into outputs, and you can see that is open. There's no loop here. There's nothing feeding back on itself. It is an open system. Now, organizations as open systems, well, there's our idea of the open system: inputs being transformed into outputs. And the inputs from an organizational point of view will be people, resources, raw materials, capital, technology. All of these may constitute inputs. And these inputs are then transformed or converted into some sort of usable output. They're converted, they're planned, they're organized, and they're controlled. And through the transformation process, they're converted into output, products and services, which may be offered to the customers and receive feedback. The feedback may constitute a loop in the system. The feedback may go back as far as the inputs and change the way the technology is used or change the design of the product slightly, and again change the transformation process, changing the output and fine-tuning it in accordance with customer requirements. Organizations are complex open systems that rely on their environments to survive. Organizations, particularly companies and commercial organizations, almost by definition are linked to the outside. They've got customers on the outside. They have suppliers on the outside. So they are open systems, and they must watch the environment and adjust changes in the environment if they're going to survive. So companies are essentially open systems. Companies can also be regarded as having systems that have hard and soft properties. Now, hard and soft properties, it's necessary to distinguish between these because it gives us a fuller picture, a richer picture of the nature of systems. Organizations are open systems. They deal with customers on the outside. They deal with suppliers which are on the outside, and they also deal with changes in customer requirements, and which means they are more vulnerable to external influences and have unstructured problems that pose high risks and ambiguity. So companies face high risks. Companies face uncertainty. Sometimes they have no idea about what exactly is going to happen in the market. It's very difficult to predict the future. In fact, it's impossible to predict the future with a high degree of confidence. Problems within an organization can be defined with hard properties and soft properties, as I said, and we need to look at what's meant by these. Depending on the type of problem, organizations can use appropriate measures to offer solutions. So it's important just to look at the problem, see what the problem is, and see what sort of solutions can be offered. Let's take the hard approach and see what it's meant by this. The hard approach is suited for structured, logical problems where management have a clear indication of how to resolve the problem. So the hard approach is used for structured and logical problems. Structured problems so that the management can do an analysis based on what they see, the evidence, and perhaps using their experience and using models and using statistics or mathematics or financial forecasting or whatever it is. They're able to use a structured approach and deal with the issues logically. That's the hard approach. The hard approach applies to problems that can be measured, such as applying pricing strategies, quality of raw materials, number of employees, and whether there is a need to recruit more staff. Many issues within the company which can be quantified or discussed logically. These issues constitute the hard approach. The Systems Development Life Cycle, the SDLC, is a technique that is harder in its approach and uses scientific and engineering approaches to solve problems. So this particular one is a really hard approach. It uses scientific thinking and scientific approach to problems and the analysis of problems, and it's highly structured. So it's using detailed calculations to work out the best approach. Now the soft approach, in contrast to the hard one we just looked at, the soft approach deals with problems that are unstructured and finding a solution is difficult. The soft approach is really dealing with the real world, the world in which we live, which does not come as neat mathematical relationships that we can feed into a computer and solve mathematically or work out statistically. The world is changing. It changes all the time. It's ambiguous. It's not well defined. And businesses have to make decisions facing high risks and facing uncertainty, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, not knowing what government policy is on a certain issue, or what will happen to the rate of interest, or what will happen to the exchange rate, or the rate of inflation, or whether the product will be rejected by the customers, or whether the product needs updating. This is the soft approach. Management have to make decisions faced with uncertainty, faced with high risks, and faced with ambiguity. The soft approach is suitable when problems cannot be measured, such as the impact of new technology on employees, redundancies. Do materials look attractive? Should we promote a particular employee? There is no hard and fast solution to these. These are not scientific statements. There isn't a formula here. Judgments have to be made. People have to think about it and make decisions and hope they made the right decisions. Checkland, who developed this particular approach, Checkland's soft systems methodology, SSM, is a technique used to address these concerns and problems that occurs in organizations. And the soft systems methodology is an important area of study and one we will return to. But it's important to understand that the world does not come as neat mathematical relationships or neat logical relationships. The world comes as a mess, as a fuzzy mess that management have to deal with. And to deal with it, they use the soft approach. They are trying to make the best out of something that is very, very complex. So let's look at the hard and soft approaches, just to get an overview, just to finish off this particular class. So we'll start with the hard system on the left and the soft system on the right. And we see immediately that the hard system, the objectives are clear and well defined. The soft system, the objectives are difficult to define. So there is a big difference between the two. Secondly, the terminology used, such as problem and solution. And the terminology used for the soft system is issue and concern. It's an issue. It's not something that can be solved in some very rigorous way using some algorithm on a computer. This is something where judgment is required. This is an issue, and there are concerns, and they need to be addressed. So it's a different language. The hard system deals with problems that are defined, and the soft system deals with messy and complex problems. Totally different. The hard system problems are measured and quantified. For the soft system, the problems can't be quantified. The hard system assumptions are based on one world view. In other words, The assumptions look at the system, look at what the system requires, and looks at the assumptions about the environment, and it looks at assumptions about the problem and tries to solve it using hard techniques, using statistics, financial packages, using various approaches, using hard techniques based on those assumptions, and can come up with various scenarios depending how the assumptions are varied. For the solve system, assumptions based on solutions through different perceptions. For the solve system, it's simply a matter of management trying to work out what is best. And to work it out, they may have meetings and consultations, and they try to find as much information as they can through market research and feedback from customers and discussions with suppliers and so on. But they still have to make a decision, and there is still no hard and fast rule to help them. The hard system is a scientific approach, whereas the soft system is systematic. It's trying to be systematic. The management talk to each other, they try to make decisions, they try to support each other, they organize meetings and discussions, and they try to collate whatever evidence they've got. They're trying to be systematic. The hard system, it's scientific. The data comes to them. It's the data the system has thrown up, and they apply some technique to analyze the data, and that's the answer. So the hard system is more deterministic. The soft system is more probabilistic. The chances are they'll get it right, hopefully. The hard system is analytical, whereas the soft system is contextual. It looks at the context. It looks at the problem within the business, the problem with the environment, what could go wrong, what could go right. It tries to look at all the factors, or as many as it can, and it tries to make a reasonable guess as to what the best course of action is. It's contextual. It's looking at the context in where the problem rests. Whereas the hard system is analytical. It takes the data, it analyzes the data, and it gets the solution. So what we've done in this session is introduced simply the idea of a system. We've looked at open and closed systems, and we've looked at hard and soft approaches to dealing with problems of systems. And that's all I'm going to deal with in this session. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.